I didn't know my marriage would end over a backyard party. It was supposed to be a celebration. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of shared bills, shared routines, shared excuses for why things felt distant lately. I was the one who wanted the party. I told myself it would help us reconnect, with friends, with laughter, maybe even with each other. Looking back, I should have paid closer attention to the guest list. The party was at our house. Nothing fancy. About 30 people, mostly mutual friends, a few from his college years, some neighbors. The grill was going, music played softly in the background, and for the first hour, everything looked normal, too normal. I was standing near the patio table when I saw him. Derek, my husband's ex-girlfriend from college, the one he dated for 2 years before he met me. I knew they were still connected online, occasional likes, harmless comments, but I had no idea she would show up at our anniversary party. When I asked him quietly why she was there, he shrugged. A friend brought her, no big deal. I wanted to believe that. The drinks kept flowing, voices got louder, and that's when Ashley, one of his friends, said it. She laughed, raising her cup, loud enough for half the yard to hear. Girl, you're smart, keeping a backup husband right here at the party. If he ever screws up, you're already covered. People laughed, including my husband. Not an awkward laugh, not a nervous one, a real laugh, relaxed, entertained. Derek stood there beside them, wearing that confident, smug smile, like he belonged exactly where he was. The sound around me faded into something distant and hollow. I watched my husband's face, waiting for him to shut it down, to say something, anything. He didn't. Instead, he smiled at her. Then he looked at me. For half a second, I saw something flash across his face. Panic, maybe guilt. But it disappeared just as quickly, replaced by that same casual smile he'd worn all evening. In that moment, something inside me went quiet. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't cause a scene. I just realized something I hadn't wanted to admit for months. Somewhere along the way, I had become the backup plan in my own marriage. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. I'm 34. That number doesn't sound old when you say it out loud, but it's old enough to know the difference between a relationship that's going through a rough patch and a relationship that has quietly stopped trying. Old enough to recognize the way silence can be louder than shouting. Old enough to feel it in your body when someone is emotionally packing their bags while still sleeping in your bed. On paper, my husband and I looked stable. We'd been married 5 years. We lived in a rental house with a yard big enough for parties and a porch big enough for pretending we were fine. We had decent jobs, predictable schedules, and the kind of couple-friend group that made people assume we'd grow old together. We weren't flashy, but we were steady, or at least that's what I told myself. I met him 8 years ago at a friend's birthday dinner downtown. I wasn't the loudest person in the room. I never have been. I'm the one who notices the small things, who keeps track of who's uncomfortable, who's forcing a smile, who hasn't spoken in 20 minutes. That night, I noticed him because he looked tired. Not in a dramatic way, just the kind of exhausted that comes from pretending your life is fine when it isn't. We ended up sitting beside each other by accident. There were too many people, too few chairs, and he offered me half his seat like it was nothing. You can have it, he said, a little smile pulling at his mouth. I'm not going anywhere. I remember laughing because it sounded like a line, but it didn't feel like one. It felt sincere. We talked for hours. Not the shallow kind of small talk people do when they're trying to impress you. Real conversation. He asked about my job, my family, what I wanted out of life. And when I answered, he listened like the answers mattered. By the end of the night, I realized I'd told him things I usually didn't tell strangers. He texted me the next day, then again the day after that. He was consistent in the way that felt comforting, not overwhelming. Dates were simple. Coffee, bookstores, long walks where we didn't need background noise because we weren't afraid of quiet. He was funny without trying too hard, attentive without being performative. The kind of man you imagine is safe. That word, safe, used to feel like a compliment. Back then, I knew he'd come out of something complicated. I knew he'd dated Derek in college and that it had ended badly. It wasn't gossip. It was part of his history, told to me casually on our third date as we sat in my car outside my apartment. She was intense, he said, staring out the windshield like he was watching an old movie he didn't want to replay. It was like being on a roller coaster every day. I remember asking, "So why did you stay for 2 years?" He exhaled, the kind of sigh that carries more truth than explanation. "Because when it was good," he said, "it felt like nothing else existed." I should have noticed how his voice softened when he said it, how his face shifted, like he was remembering something with a tenderness he didn't realize he still had. But I didn't want to be that woman who obsesses over an ex. I didn't want to start our relationship by competing with someone who wasn't even in the room. So I nodded, said something supportive, and told myself it was in the past. And for a long time, it was. We dated 3 years before he proposed. He did it on a quiet Saturday morning in our kitchen. No crowd, no fancy restaurant, just him, nervous hands, a small ring box he'd clearly opened and closed a dozen times before he finally got the courage to do it. "I know this isn't dramatic," he said, voice shaking in a way that made my heart squeeze. "But I don't want dramatic. I want real. I want you." I said yes before he even finished the sentence. At first, marriage felt like an extension of what we already had. We built routines, we split chores without keeping score, we had inside jokes, Sunday grocery runs, nights on the couch with our legs tangled together, the kind of ordinary intimacy that feels like home. Then, slowly, so slowly I couldn't point to one moment, it started shifting. It wasn't the big, obvious things. It was the small ones. He started taking his phone into the bathroom. He started laughing at messages and not telling me what was funny. He started coming home later, saying work was hectic, saying he was tired, saying not tonight when I reached for him. At first, I believed him, because in my mind, love meant giving people the benefit of the doubt, and I had been giving him the benefit of the doubt for months. The hardest part wasn't even the distance between us. It was the way he acted around my friends, warm, charming, attentive, then turned quiet and distracted the second we were alone. Like he could still perform being a good husband in public, but couldn't bring himself to be one in private. And when it came to his friends, especially Ashley in that group, there was a dynamic I never fully liked. They teased him constantly. They treated marriage like a joke, like something that made him domesticated, like I was some life choice that limited him, instead of someone he chose. Sometimes he defended me, but more often he laughed along. And every time he laughed, a small part of me wondered if he agreed with them. By the time the anniversary party came, I wasn't planning it because I felt secure. I was planning it because I was scared. Scared that if I didn't force something, connection, laughter, familiarity, we would keep drifting until we became strangers who shared a lease and a last name. So I made a guest list. I sent invitations. I told myself a party could bring us back to what we used to be. I didn't realize I was setting the stage for the moment I would finally understand what was really happening. Because Derek showing up wasn't random. Not really. And deep down, I think some part of me already knew that. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud. Looking back now, the signs weren't subtle. They just didn't scream. They whispered. And I was tired enough to mistake whispers for nothing. January was when it really started. That's when the air between us shifted from distant to guarded. Conversations became transactional. Who was paying which bill? Who was picking up groceries? What time we needed to leave for family obligations. We spoke like coworkers managing a shared project, not two people who used to stay up until 2 a.m. talking about everything and nothing. When I tried to bring it up, he brushed it off. "I'm just stressed," he said more than once. "Work's been crazy. It's nothing about us." And I wanted to believe that, because believing anything else meant admitting something was wrong, that I didn't know how to fix. Then came the gym. In February, he announced, casually, like it was an afterthought, that he'd joined a gym near his office. "New year, new habits," he said. wanted to feel better, get back in shape. I smiled, told him that was great, that I was proud of him. I didn't question it. Why would I? People are allowed to want better for themselves. Husbands are allowed to go to the gym. Suspicion doesn't start with logic. It starts with pattern. And at that point, there wasn't enough of one yet. Except things changed. He started buying new clothes. Nothing dramatic, just slightly nicer versions of what he already owned. Shirts that fit better, shoes he never wore around me. He paid more attention to his hair, started showering the second he got home, even if he hadn't done anything physical all day. Small things, easy things to explain away. Then there were the schedule changes. Meetings ran late, projects popped up last minute. He started saying things like, "Don't wait up," or "I'll grab something on the way home." When he did come home, he was distracted. Phone face down on the table, thumb hovering over the screen when it buzzed. If I asked who it was, he'd answer too quickly. Just work. Group chat. Ashley being annoying. Always an explanation. Always reasonable. Always just enough to make me feel silly for even asking. His friends noticed it too. Ashley joked one night at dinner, "Damn, married life must be treating you well. You're never around anymore." He laughed. Didn't deny it. And when she looked at me like it was all harmless teasing, I laughed too. Because that's what women like me do when we don't want to seem insecure. But the unease kept building. I noticed how his mood shifted when Derek's name came up, how casual he pretended to be, how quickly he changed the subject. I noticed how often he mentioned running into her by coincidence, at the gym, near his office, at a coffee shop he'd never cared about before. "They just talked," he said once when I asked. It wasn't a big deal. That sentence stayed with me, not because of what it said, but because of what it assumed, that it shouldn't matter to me. The distance between us wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches, no slammed doors, no accusations, just a slow erosion of intimacy. Less touch, less eye contact, less effort. And the more I tried to bridge the gap, the more it felt like he was already halfway gone. By the time I suggested throwing the anniversary party, it wasn't about celebration. It was about proof. Proof that we still existed, that we still had a shared life people recognized, that he hadn't emotionally stepped out of our marriage while still sleeping beside me every night. I told myself it would be good for us. He hesitated, but eventually agreed. What I didn't know was that by then, other conversations had already happened. Conversations I wasn't part of. Jokes that had already been planned. Lines that had already been crossed. The party wasn't the beginning of the problem. It was just the moment everything I'd been ignoring finally surfaced, out loud, in front of witnesses. And once that seed was planted, there was no going back. There are moments that split your life into before and after. At the time, they don't always arrive with drama or warning. Sometimes they come disguised as laughter, clinking glasses, and a joke that lands a little too comfortably. The night of our anniversary party was warm. Not just the weather, the kind of early evening where the air still holds the sun. Music played from a small speaker near the porch. People moved in loose clusters, cups in hand, laughing about things that didn't matter. I remember thinking, maybe I was wrong. Maybe this was working. Maybe we just needed this. Noise, people, something to shake us out of the quiet tension that had wrapped itself around our marriage. I was standing near the patio table with a drink when Ashley's voice cut through the chatter. "Girl, you're brilliant," she said, loud and unapologetic. "Having a backup husband right here at the party. If he ever screws up, you're already set." For half a second, my brain didn't register what she'd said. It felt like hearing something in a foreign language. Recognizable words, wrong meaning. Then people laughed. Not a polite chuckle. Not awkward silence followed by someone changing the subject. Real laughter. Easy. Familiar. Like this was a joke they'd all heard before. I turned slowly, my body reacting before my mind caught up. My husband was standing there, drink in hand, smiling, relaxed, amused. Derek stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't surprised. He wore that same confident smirk I'd noticed earlier, the one that said he felt exactly where he belonged. The sound around me dulled, like someone had turned down the volume on the world. I watched my husband's face, waiting for him to say, "That's not funny," waiting for him to shut it down, waiting for him to choose me. He didn't. Instead, he laughed again, this time louder, and that was when I felt it. Not anger, not even heartbreak, just clarity. It was like something in my chest finally clicked into place, like all the months of doubt, all the little moments I'd brushed aside, suddenly lined up into a picture I couldn't ignore anymore. I stepped closer. The group noticed me then. Conversation stalled, laughter faded. "You know that feeling," I said calmly, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "When you walk into a room and realize everyone's been talking about you?" No one answered. "Yeah," I continued, meeting Ashley's eyes first, then Derek's. "That. Except I didn't just realize it. I heard every word." My husband's smile faltered, just slightly. I smiled back. "That's actually really smart planning," I said, having a contingency plan. I reached into my pocket. The wedding ring felt heavier than it ever had before. 5 years of marriage, and it slid off my finger in about 2 seconds. No resistance, no hesitation. The backyard went completely silent. Someone turned off the music. I didn't look to see who. I walked straight toward Derek. His smirk vanished. His eyes widened as I held the ring out to him. "Tag in," I said quietly. "She's all yours now." I dropped the ring into his hand before he could react. He froze, staring at it like it might burn him. Then I turned to my husband. He'd gone pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time that night, he looked exactly like someone who'd lost control of a situation he thought he had mastered. "You wanted a backup," I said, my voice carrying across the yard. "Congratulations. He's your main guy now. I'm done." No one spoke. 30 people, and not a single sound. Some stared at me, some stared at him, most stared at the ground. I didn't wait for an explanation. I didn't ask a question. There was nothing left to discuss. I walked through the house, past the half-eaten food and empty cups, grabbed my keys from the kitchen counter, and walked out. My own anniversary party. My own home. And I left without looking back. What surprised me most was what I didn't feel. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't furious. I didn't feel the urge to scream or cry. I felt clear. Like I'd been staring through fog for months, and someone had finally wiped the glass clean. As I started the car, I heard doors slamming behind me, voices overlapping, the sound of a party dissolving all at once. My phone began to buzz before I even reached the end of the street. I didn't answer, because I already knew something I couldn't unknow. The joke wasn't the problem. The comment wasn't the problem. The problem was that he laughed. And once you see that, really see it, there's no way to pretend you're still standing on equal ground. I didn't drive far. I didn't need to. I just needed distance, enough space between me and that house to let my body catch up with what my mind had already decided. I ended up at my sister's place a little after 9:30. She didn't ask questions when she opened the door and saw my face. She just stepped aside and said, "Come in, you look like you need a drink." That's the thing about family who's been through their own damage. They don't demand explanations before offering shelter. I sat on her couch, staring at a blank TV screen while my phone vibrated endlessly in my bag. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Him. Again and again. Calls, texts, voicemails stacking up like panic. I turned the phone off. Not because I was trying to punish him, but because I knew if I answered, I'd be forced into a conversation I wasn't ready to have. And worse, one I might let him steer. That night, sleep came in fragments. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. Ashley's grin, Derek's smirk, my husband's laugh. Not one image on its own, but the way they fit together too neatly. Sunday morning, my sister made coffee and sat across from me at the kitchen table. "You want to tell me what happened?" she said gently, "or do you want me to guess?" So I told her. The party, the joke, the ring, walking out. She didn't interrupt. She didn't rush to fill the silence when I finished. She just listened, hands wrapped around her mug, eyes steady. When I was done, she nodded once. "Good," she said. That surprised me. "It doesn't feel good," I admitted. "It never does at first," she replied. "But let me ask you something. How long have you felt like something was off?" The question landed harder than anything else, because the truth was, it hadn't started that night. It had been building for months. The distance, the excuses, the way conversations had thinned until they were nothing but logistics. When was the last time we'd done anything together? Just the two of us. I had to think. Christmas, at his parents' house. And even then, we hadn't really been together. We'd just been in the same place at the same time. "And Derek?" my sister asked. "When did he reappear?" I told her about the gym, the coffee, the casual mentions I'd ignored because I didn't want to be paranoid. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't blame me. She just said, "You trusted your husband. That's not a flaw." Later that morning, I went back to the house while he was at work. I waited until I knew his car would be gone. The place looked exactly like we'd left it. Plates still on tables, empty cups scattered across the yard, the grill untouched. Like the aftermath of a celebration no one wanted to clean up. I went straight to the bedroom and started packing essentials, clothes, toiletries, documents. My hands moved automatically, like muscle memory had taken over. That's when I saw it, his tablet, still on the nightstand, still logged in. I knew I shouldn't look, but I did. Weeks of messages. Not explicit, not physical, and somehow that made it worse. Inside jokes, late-night texts, complaints about me, about how I didn't get him anymore, about how Derek always knew how to make him laugh. One message stopped me cold. "I'm glad you're coming to the party. It'll be good to see you. Wouldn't miss it. Been too long." I know. I've missed this. I took photos. Every one of them. By the time I left the house, my hands were shaking, but not with doubt, with confirmation. Back at my sister's place, I made one call, a lawyer. And when the receptionist asked whether I wanted a consultation or to move forward with filing, I realized this wasn't a reaction anymore. It was a decision. Once the word filing entered the conversation, everything accelerated. There was no dramatic moment where I broke down and cried into the phone. No shaking voice. I gave my name, confirmed availability, and booked the appointment for Wednesday morning. When I hung up, I sat very still, like if I moved too fast, the reality might crack. This wasn't a fight anymore. This wasn't something to work through. This was the beginning of the end. My phone came back on that afternoon. I didn't even have to scroll to see the damage. Missed calls, voicemails, text stacked on top of each other. "We need to talk. Please answer. This is getting out of hand." I typed one message and stared at it for a full minute before sending. "There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice Saturday night." The response came immediately. "It was just a joke. You're overreacting." Overreacting. Like I was the one who'd invited an ex to our anniversary party. Like I was the one who laughed while my marriage was turned into a punchline in front of 30 people. I didn't reply. Monday morning, I went back to the house again, this time with intention. I packed more clothes, my personal files, things that mattered. I avoided looking at anything sentimental, photos, cards, objects that belonged to a version of us that didn't exist anymore. That's when I noticed something else. Bank statements. They were sitting in a folder on the desk, unopened. I didn't plan to look, but once I did, I couldn't stop. Coffee shop charges. Midday. During work hours. On days he'd told me he was swamped or stuck in meetings. 2 drinks. Lunch. Repeating patterns. I took photos. By Tuesday night, my dining table at my sister's place was covered in printouts. Bank statements, credit card bills, timestamps. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was building understanding. When my sister came home and saw the mess, she exhaled slowly. "You look like you're investigating a crime." "Maybe I am," I said. We matched dates with texts, lies with receipts. 15 instances, minimum, where his story didn't match the evidence. 15 times he chose deception over honesty. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Something told me to answer. It was Marcus, one of his friends, the quiet one, the one who looked uncomfortable at the party. "I don't know how to say this," he began, "but that backup husband joke, it wasn't spontaneous." My stomach dropped. "Ashley planned it," he said. "She told a few of us ahead of time. Thought it'd be funny." I closed my eyes. "And your husband knew," Marcus added quietly. "They talked about it. He said you'd laugh it off." That was the moment something inside me hardened. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't misunderstanding. It was consent. He'd approved the humiliation. He'd signed off on it. When I hung up, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just felt done. Wednesday morning, I met my lawyer. He listened, took notes, didn't interrupt. "You have documentation," he said finally. "That matters." Thursday, we filed. Friday, he was served. That's when the calls shifted from apologetic to panicked. From "I miss you" to "how could you do this to us?" But it was too late. Because by then, it wasn't just about what he'd done. It was about who he'd shown me he was. And once you see that clearly, there's no going back. The silence hit hardest after everything was set in motion. Once the paperwork was filed, once the calls turned frantic and then slowly tapered off, there was a stretch of time where nothing happened. No confrontations, no dramatic scenes, just days stacked on top of each other, quiet and heavy. That was the lowest point. Not the party, not the ring, not even the discovery of the messages. It was the aftermath, when adrenaline faded and reality settled in. I slept on my sister's couch for weeks. Not because she insisted, but because I didn't know where else to go yet. Some nights I slept too much. Other nights, I didn't sleep at all. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, replaying memories I hadn't thought about in years. Not the bad ones, the good ones. The first road trip we took together. The way he used to reach for my hand in public without thinking. The night he proposed, how nervous he was, how sure I felt when I said yes. Those memories hurt more than the betrayal because they made me question everything. Was any of it real? Or was I always just convenient? One afternoon, my lawyer called. "He wants to contest the divorce," he said calmly. "Claims you abandoned the marriage by leaving. He's asking for counseling first." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "Tell him no," I said. "We're past counseling." There was a pause. "He's also asking about spousal support, says he can't afford the rent on his own." The emptiness inside me shifted into something sharper. "He can move somewhere cheaper," I replied, "or move in with Derek." My lawyer cleared his throat, hiding a chuckle. "I'll phrase it more professionally." After I hung up, I sat there feeling hollow. I wasn't angry anymore. That surprised me. The rage from that night had burned itself out, leaving behind something quieter but heavier, a dull ache, a sense of having wasted years on someone who'd already been planning his exit while I was still trying to hold us together. I went for long drives with no destination, sat in parking lots, walked through grocery stores without buying anything, just moving to feel like I still existed. One afternoon, I found myself at the park where we'd had our first date. I sat on the same bench, watched kids on the playground, couples walking dogs, life moving forward without any regard for the fact that mine felt paused. I wondered if even then, on that first date, I'd been a backup plan, the safe choice after a heartbreak he never fully healed from. That thought broke something open inside me, not loudly, quietly. I realized I'd spent months trying to be enough for someone who'd already decided I wasn't his first choice. And that realization hurt more than anything else, because it meant there was nothing I could have done differently. That night, a message came through from Ashley. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to go like that." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, "You meant every word. You just didn't expect me to do anything about it." Her response was immediate. "He misses you. He made a mistake." I replied once more. "He made a choice. There's a difference. Then I blocked her. I lay awake that night feeling stripped down to nothing. No marriage, no future plans, no clear sense of who I was without the life I'd built around him. That was the darkest moment. Not because I wanted him back, but because I didn't yet know who I was without him. And standing in that uncertainty, alone, exhausted, emptied out, was the hardest thing I'd ever done. The shift didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic speech, no sudden surge of confidence, just a quiet moment where I realized something fundamental had changed, not around me, but inside me. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. My lawyer called to say my husband wanted to meet face to face, said there were things he needed to say that couldn't be handled through lawyers. He was willing, apparently, to agree to the terms I'd asked for if I'd just hear him out. My first instinct was no. I didn't owe him closure. I didn't owe him understanding. I didn't owe him one more chance to rewrite what he'd already destroyed. But if one conversation could save me months of legal back and forth, if it could make this clean and final, maybe it was worth it. So I agreed. Public place, Saturday morning. A diner on the east side of town. Neutral ground. I arrived early and ordered coffee. My lawyer sat a few booths away, newspaper open, pretending to be just another customer. He'd lost weight, dark circles under his eyes. His confidence, usually effortless, looked worn thin. He slid into the booth across from me and folded his hands together like he was bracing himself. "Thank you for meeting me," he said quietly. I didn't respond. He took a breath. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be, but I need you to understand something. Nothing happened with Derek." I leaned forward slightly. "You think that makes it better? We never slept together. We never even kissed." "I saw the messages," I said evenly. "I know exactly what happened." "It was just talking," he insisted. "Just friendship." I held his gaze. "Let me ask you something," I said. "If I had invited an ex-boyfriend to our anniversary party, if my friends had joked about him being my backup husband, if you'd found months of messages where I complained about you and talked about how much I missed him, would you call that just friendship?" His eyes dropped to the table. "That's what I thought." He rubbed his face, frustration leaking through the cracks. I was confused. When Derek came back into my life, it brought up things I thought I was over. "So you handled that confusion by lying to me," I said. "By meeting her behind my back. By letting your friends humiliate me." "I never meant to humiliate you. The joke was planned," I said calmly. "You approved it." That landed. His shoulders slumped. The silence between us stretched. "I thought we could fix this," he said finally. "Counseling, a reset. 5 years doesn't just disappear." "It doesn't," I agreed, "but it does end." He reached across the table, hesitating before pulling his hand back. "Is there anything I can say?" he asked. "Anything I can do?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Sign the papers." His face crumpled. "I loved you," he whispered. "No," I replied gently. "You loved the security I gave you. You loved having someone who stayed while you kept your options open." He didn't argue, and that's when I knew. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't fighting for dignity. I already had it. I stood up, placed a bill on the table, and met his eyes one last time. "Let me go," I said. "That's the kindest thing you can do now." I walked out of that diner lighter than I'd walked in, because in that moment, I finally understood my worth. And once you do that, the power shifts. Once I walked out of that diner, everything unfolded quickly, and without me needing to do anything at all. That was the strangest part. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't expose screenshots publicly. I didn't call his friends or family to explain my side. I just stepped away. And when you stop holding a situation together, gravity takes over. 3 days after the meeting, my lawyer called. "He signed," he said. "No contest. Agreed to the terms you asked for. A clean split. No spousal support. Joint account divided evenly. Each of us keeping our own vehicles and walking away with what we brought into the marriage." Just like that. The man who'd been so confident at the party, so amused by the idea of a backup, folded the moment he realized there would be no dramatic reconciliation to save his image. Word spread faster than I expected, not because I told anyone, but because people talk when a marriage implodes publicly. When someone hands over a wedding ring in front of 30 witnesses and walks out without raising their voice, people start asking questions. And this time, the answers didn't protect him. Friends who'd laughed at the joke stopped returning his calls. Invitations dried up. Ashley went quiet after realizing no one wanted to be associated with what she'd orchestrated. Even Marcus reached out once, to apologize again, to tell me most of the group had distanced themselves. He thought you'd cave, Marcus admitted. Most people do. I didn't. That's what made it uncomfortable for them. His family reached out once. Careful messages, neutral language, asking if there was any chance we could work things out. I responded politely, briefly, and without detail. Number: the decision is final. After that, silence. I moved into a small rental on the other side of town before the month was over. 2 bedrooms, quiet street, no shared memories echoing off the walls. The first night there, I sat on the floor eating takeout because I hadn't unpacked yet. And for the first time in months, my chest didn't feel tight. At work, something shifted too. I hadn't realized how much emotional energy I'd been bleeding into a marriage that was already dead. With that weight gone, I focused. I volunteered for projects, stayed late when I wanted to, not out of obligation, but clarity. My manager noticed. 2 weeks later, I was offered a promotion. More responsibility, more money, a future that didn't include managing someone else's indecision. I heard through the same social circles that he and Derek didn't last. 2 weeks, apparently. Not because of drama, but because once fantasy met reality, there was nothing there. She liked the attention. He liked the validation. Neither wanted the commitment. And suddenly, he had no wife and no backup. When someone mentioned it to me, I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No bitterness, no urge to say, I told you so, just distance. That was the real consequence. Not punishment, not revenge, but irrelevance. The man who once stood at the center of my life became someone I no longer needed updates about. I spent evenings on my porch relearning how to be alone without feeling lonely. I reconnected with parts of myself I'd shrunk to keep the peace. I stopped apologizing for having standards. By the time the divorce was finalized, the fallout had already settled. His world got smaller. Mine got quieter and stronger. And that balance told me everything I needed to know. The divorce became official on a Wednesday afternoon. My lawyer called, congratulated me in that careful, professional way people use when they know celebration isn't quite the right word. I thanked him, hung up, and sat there for a long moment doing absolutely nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt relieved, like I'd finally put something heavy down after carrying it far longer than I should have. I'd moved into my new place 2 weeks earlier. A small house, quiet, neutral, no shared history baked into the walls. The first night I slept there, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt clean. I focused on work. I ran again, early mornings, just me and the road, my breath steady, my thoughts finally my own. I went to the gym across town, not to prove anything, not to reinvent myself, but because movement reminded me I was still here, still capable, still whole. People asked how I was doing. I told them the truth. I'm good, not fine, not getting by. Good. What surprised me most wasn't how quickly life stabilized. It was how clearly I could see the lesson once the noise faded. The party wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to me. It was the best, because it forced me to stop negotiating my worth. It forced me to see that love without respect is just familiarity wearing a mask. That staying quiet to keep the peace only teaches people how much you're willing to tolerate. I didn't leave because of a joke. I left because laughter revealed the truth. I left because I realized I was standing in a marriage where I was expected to compete, silently, for my own husband's attention. Where I was supposed to feel grateful for being chosen even temporarily, and I refused. Walking away didn't make me heartless. It made me honest. Months later, I can sit in my backyard, watch the sunset, and feel something I didn't feel for a long time: contentment. Not because my life is perfect, but because it's mine. I don't need a backup plan anymore. I don't need to be someone's safe option. I need and deserve to be chosen fully, or not at all. And if there's one thing I learned from that anniversary night, it's this: when someone shows you that you're optional, believe them. Then choose yourself, always.